Hello everybody, here we are today talking about the Mikko Rantanen Martin Necas trade. It is a blockbuster between the Carolina Hurricanes, Colorado Avalanche, and Chicago Blackhawks. But before we get started with it, please make sure to subscribe if you're new to me or hockey, whatever the case may be. That being said, let's get on into it. Wow, all I can really say is wow, as this deal is insane. I ended up going to bed last night thinking, what am I going to be talking about in a video today? I wake up and I see the news and I say, I know exactly what I'm going to be talking about today, as this deal is just insane. What exactly is all going down here? Well, you've got Mikko Rantanen and Taylor Hall going to the Carolina Hurricanes. Meanwhile, the Colorado Avalanche are getting Martin Necas, Jack Drury, a second-round pick, and a fourth-round pick. And then the Chicago Blackhawks are tied into this by, of course, getting a third-round pick from the Carolina Hurricanes they actually originally owned, and then taking on over $4 million of Mikko's salary. And this is just still something where I'm trying to wrap my head around all of it. But of course, we'll talk about the juicy part first, which is Mikko getting traded over to Carolina. This is certainly a big deal. Mikko is a great goal scorer. Over the past 3 years, he is 5th in the league for goals in this time. This is somebody that is on his way to possibly having his 5th straight season with 30 goals or more, his 4th straight season with 35 goals or more, and then very possibly having his 3rd straight season with 40 goals or more. This is a guy that can be a 50-goal scorer for you, who is dangerous and is somebody that come playoff time is absolutely a threat. Over his past 18 playoff games, he has 11 goals. This is what Carolina wants. This is what they need. And I know kind of the narrative is, oh, well, Carolina wants to get goal scoring for the playoffs because there's been times where it's fallen through. Yes, that is true. But I think sometimes people imagine that as elimination games. But over their past 2 elimination games, they've scored 3 goals in each of those. I think it's more during the course of the series, having those games that instead of them being low scoring where they are on the loser's end of it, they have a true difference maker that can go out there and, again, maybe take over a series and get nearly a goal per game in that series and move them on to another round, which, of course, Carolina's done a lot of in recent years, but they haven't been able to punch through to that final barrier, which has been the Stanley Cup final. Of course, they want to claim Lord Stanley at that time when it got there. Then you have Taylor Hall, who's part of this deal. His numbers probably aren't, again, anything that make you say wow, but he was on a rough-looking Chicago team and wasn't getting a crazy amount of minutes. He's an older guy, yes, but I'm kind of hoping that maybe with him being on a better team and just being in a better spot, that the results can be better. Maybe not so much, oh, well, now he is at a 50-point pace or something like that. Just more of when he's out there on the ice, that the results are in Carolina's favor. And maybe this is one of those things that sneaks under the radar with this deal where Taylor Hall could provide a boost come playoff time. But of course, everybody's going to be talking about Mikko because he's a jersey seller and maybe the biggest star on the roster already. I know a lot of people might complain because Sebastian Aho, but Mikko is definitely a contender for that top spot on the lineup, or in the lineup. Maybe, again, I'd say probably the biggest name. Now, as for Colorado, they are getting Necas, who is a younger player than Mikko, and is somebody that is having a career year. Looks like he might average over a point per game for the first time in his career. Been a good player, but is also somebody where you're wondering kind of what that ceiling is for him in his career. And I think for the Avalanche, they might get a good opportunity to test this. I don't know exactly how this plays out and how they view Necas in terms of their long-term plans, but if he has a good finish to this season and then is with them under contract through next year, which he is, you could see a spot where he has another career year. And then the Colorado Avalanche have a guy that'll be 27 years old, coming off of back-to-back career years, where we could be talking about anywhere from the 80 to 90 point range or better if things really went well for him. And with him being a free agent, I think that the Avs would try to find a deal that works for both sides and get something that's kind of fair. But you wouldn't be in a bad spot if you're able to sign him, and he is, again, finding success with Colorado, entering the prime of his career. I'm not mad about that at all if that is something that they are able to find that long-term success, or even in the short to mid-term where they find value out of him, and then possibly later in the coming years end up going out there and flipping him for, again, a return. But, of course, Martin is not as big of a name as Mikko, and I'm sure the fans feel very frustrated knowing that their star is gone, and they're getting a guy that is good, but doesn't fill that gap entirely. Now, as for Drury, he is a player that's kind of the opposite end here. If you're comparing him to Taylor Hall, more of the results actually were in his favor when he was with Carolina. Almost said Chicago there. But Drury, if he's going on to Colorado, might actually be able to help them still get good results and maybe even shore things up defensively a little bit for a team that isn't perfect. Covered that in a video yesterday where Mackenzie Blackwood, despite having good numbers, wasn't, again, having a group that was going out there in front of him and making it to, it was just an absolute easy job. So maybe Drury can kind of chip in and be kind of the Taylor Hall of this, where if the Avs going around, they say Drury has been one of those hidden guys where the offensive numbers, the points totals and whatnot are going to be definitely a lot lower, probably even compared to somebody like Taylor Hall, but could give them a good return come playoff time, which is really what it's all about here, to have those depth players step up in a big way for you. And then, of course, as well, too, for the Colorado Avalanche, they get a second-round pick and then a fourth-round pick. You know, for a UFA, which Mikko Rantanen was, where they weren't necessarily able to get a deal done, this couldn't be the end-all, be-all. You can get good players in the second and fourth round. So, again, for a team that has lost pieces over the years, maybe they can kind of restock a little bit. And then finally, out of all these teams, you have Chicago. I think a lot of people are kind of disappointed in what Chicago got in return here. You know, it's always tough because I feel like when you are getting a player for a player, it's a little bit easier to measure things, but when you are a team that's involved in a multi-team trade deal that is more than two teams, and then you start to throw in picks, it gets a little bit more hard to kind of figure that thing out. But I will say this, if you are helping the Carolina Hurricanes go out there and acquire Mikko Rantanen, who is a game changer, and they have not really been able to go on that run in the Stanley Cup final yet, I don't think it's that crazy to say that you deserve more than a third-round pick. I'm not an expert when it comes to the trades and whatnot. I think it's a little bit easier for me to look at the numbers and say how things are going. But in a simple term, getting a star power player that could get you a Stanley Cup, I think if you're Chicago, you absolutely should try to get anything and everything you could. So I understand why people that are Hawks fans or just people looking at this trade probably are wondering how things kind of transpired the way they did. Now, overall, as things typically tend to go, this is heavily dependent on how the next few months go for these sides, especially for Carolina. Eric Tulsky is in his first year as a GM and is making a big statement. He is getting the biggest fish that they could have got, and this could be the game changer that they've needed for years. Carolina, they've just needed something. They've been doing the same thing over and over and over again. Get a lot of shots, dominate the competition, get a lot of that zone possession time, but they aren't getting that run to the Stanley Cup final to try to claim the championship. And I think this is something that is a little bit different that could end up working out for them. And I think this is big because of the fact that I think beforehand, you didn't necessarily pick the Hurricanes to go out there and move outside of the East on their way to the Stanley Cup final. And in this case, it does shake things up a little bit to where you say maybe something could happen here. Of course, there's going to be a lot of things to talk about here. If they don't go on a run, that's going to hurt. If Mikko Rantanen leaves, that is going to be disastrous. But at the same time as well, too, if they win the Stanley Cup and Mikko leaves, you got a Stanley Cup. If they win the Stanley Cup or go on a Stanley Cup final run and then Mikko signs an extension, you've got a guy that could be a 40 to 50 goal scorer for you for a long time to come, and I think that is really important here. So basically into the stages of the summer, this is going to be something we need to kind of keep an eye out for Tulsky to see if he is playing chess when everybody else is playing checkers. But I just got to be honest, I love this move, and the Hurricanes have been a team that I've enjoyed watching play in recent years, really for a long time actually, for being honest, probably my freshman year of college. And now you are seeing a team that adds just a little bit of that excitement factor to a team that was already winning a decent amount. As for the Colorado Avalanche, this is a deal that stings. You are losing a guy that won you a championship, a guy that is one of your best players in your lineup on a team that features Cale Makar and Nathan MacKinnon, and you realize that he could be gone for good. And I think that's really a tough thing to deal with here when you are a fan. But at the same time, too, Martin Necas could be a player that helps out for the next year or two. And this is, again, kind of going to be decided by how the playoffs go and how those runs go and whatnot. Martin Necas, if they are out early, could be a scapegoat if he has a bad series. But at the same time, too, I wanted to highlight that I think they've made the playoffs 7 years in a row, 6 years in a row, one of those two. They have only made it out of the second round on one occasion. So if they get knocked out in the second round again, you're going to say, well, that's Martin Necas' fault. Or you're going to say, if Mikko had been there, had we or would we have necessarily gone on to the conference finals? Not like it's a guarantee from what we've seen in this broader history, and what we can kind of say is that it's not a guarantee. So, yeah. So, yes, the deal is done, and of course, time is going to be a big factor here, and I'm hoping that both of these guys can find success as well as more of the accessories of this trade. But it is still something that I think we could be talking about for years to come, to see some of the ramifications of all this and how things played out, especially if teams like Colorado or Carolina go on to win the Stanley Cup. They aren't the favorites necessarily, but I certainly think that Carolina is taking a step closer to getting to where they want to be, to win their first Stanley Cup since 2006 and just their second in franchise history. So we'll have to see how things pan out here. What are your thoughts on this deal? Who do you think won? Who do you think lost? Let me know down below in the comments. Also, please make sure to like this video if you enjoyed it. Subscribe if you're new. Everybody stay safe. Have a great night. And you go love hockey, all right. Goodbye, Brigadiers and Brigadettes. This is your captain signing off. Have a great night.